Hello and welcome to Behind the Podcast. I'm Brandon.
I'm Moose.
I'm Weston.
And today we're going to be talking about the art, the look and feel of a game, both in the game world itself and in the real world with books and box art and comics and stuff.
Art's a really important part of game. I mean, it's the main way that we interact with the game itself and anything else that goes along with it. It's present from like purchasing games to seeing reviews on things, or just when you see in a magazine something talking about it or an advertisement about the game. That's the first thing that draws you in. It's like, what does this look like?
Why did you change between advertisement and advertisement in the same sentence?
Did I say advertisement?
You said both. This is maddening.
Did I really say advertisement? Because that's really weird that I would have said that.
You did.
Yeah.
I'd never say it that way.
The record will show.
Yeah. Let the record show my client said both.
It's really weird to me. I don't know what pattern of speech I had that I would have to stop it and change the stress.
So, a good place to start there might just be one that you felt was really successful in all aspects of its execution.
Well, let's start with how important is the look of the game to the game?
I mean,
is it the make or break part of it, or can gameplay make up for it? How important is that look to you?
I mean, there's a lot to be said about art and kind of its limitations from era to era as to how much you might get drawn into a game. I think right now, since the trend is for devices to have such powerful capabilities, that it's all about realism to get the immersion. But that's not, but that what I'm saying, that's a trend. I'm not saying that that's what's important to me, because I feel there's a lot of charm in games that work the best with the limitations that they have on older consoles to get a feeling of character or emotion from what you actually see on the screen. So I think that it's important based on what kind of a game you're playing and what kind of interaction you want to have with the game itself. Because a list of rules by itself isn't going to always hold up. If Mario was a block, jumping on the screen, jumping on smaller blocks, I wouldn't care. It's just annoying.
oh, see, but then there's the game, Thomas Was Alone.
Yep.
Yeah. They are all blocks, and they do
are.
an artful execution of character and feeling with just blocks of different size and color. So if you're talking about current trends, yeah, when you look at the huge blockbuster AAA games that are, you got like Assassin's Creed and Call of Duty and Tomb Raider's really good, and there's a lot of realistic games out now, but of course they all have their own style. It might not be as obvious to a lot of people, but Call of Duty has a lot of especially with the what was it? What's the Cuban one? Black Ops, right? That one has a lot of like black and orange, and it really pushed that color scheme and that sort of idea of these dark colors, which Killzone did a while back as well. You'll see if you go back every 5 years, you'll see the exact same trends occur again and again. But if you're talking about like the style and look of a game, it's of course important, but gameplay is what a game is, but it matters if it's going to sell or not, if it looks aesthetically pleasing, because most of the time people... I can't believe we don't have more demos. Like, now we have an easy platform to administer all of these demos.
There was a whole console around that idea, the Ouya, that ultimately failed.
Yeah, but it failed for probably marketing reasons more than anything else.
We could probably do a podcast
that's
just
true.
about
Yeah.
negative press it received and reasons why it didn't fail, both on their end and on the end of everyone
It's
else.
the Coldplay of video game consoles.
Well, but Coldplay was massively successful.
It's Coldplay's younger, less successful brother.
Half brother.
Yeah.
So you feel that art's important, but gameplay could make up for a not stellar art.
It can. Gameplay is a piece, and game art is a piece.
I will say, you mentioned Thomas is Alone as a rebuttal to Miguel's Mario block But Thomas Alone was a very arty game. Even if it was simple in the art, it wasn't just blocks jumping up and down in place of Mario.
It was a story, you know.
Yeah, it had a story. It was a very artistic styled game.
Well, that's kind of the thing.
Like,
it's all a balance. And you can move the slider more one way, put more of your asset development into one particular function, and then everything else can kind of not suffer, but it doesn't have to be as tailored.
Yeah, and good looking art doesn't necessarily mean hyper realistic like The Division and COD Blops, but I mean, Mario looked pretty good, I felt, and Sonic, as we've seen, is really good.
I was going to say that playing Super Mario 64 on a CRT monitor feels it feels. I mean, if you care about resolution and things like that, that's what you care about. Then, of course, whatever's newest looks best to you. But then you have a bad opinion. And if you play Super Mario 64 on a CRT TV as designed, it still looks fantastic. And that's one of those games that I think has all of the sliders to max. It's got excellent gameplay. I guess not story, but but it didn't need it.
But I mean, yeah, art, even traditional art, not just video games, but even traditional art is built and designed to be looked at in a certain way. And I think that applies to video game art too. And a lot of people talk about emulators and their high-res texture replacements and stuff like that to make things look beautiful, but these games, you sort of have to keep in mind that they were made with a CRT, not even a flat CRT, but they were made with a rounded screen CRT in mind, with scan lines and all of that. And so when you take those those NES games and stuff like that and try and put them on an upscaled HD TV, they don't always come out with the intended picture. As you're talking about with the Mario 64, if you put that on an upscaled high-res TV, it doesn't quite look right.
Yeah, or Dark Cloud 2. Dark Cloud 2 is beautiful, and that's an example of a very stylized game that I still think is just absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, I was playing it on the CRT monitor, and at home I was playing it on HD TV, and I was like, man, this is bad. And then I played it on the actual equipment it's designed for, and I was like, wow, this still looks... If a game came out now that looked like that, I would still buy it. I'd still be like, this is still great. I don't even care.
Absolutely.
With PS2 graphics, and we're on the 4 now. So...
Yeah, and Dark Cloud 2 looks great on the CRT, and I think it would still look fine on a flat panel LCD screen as long as it wasn't the upscaled, 1080p TV. If you put that on a normal 480p LCD screen, I think that it would still look pretty good.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, while we're talking about this, because we have this, I think we need to kind of set maybe just a little bit of a baseline. What looks aesthetically good as art is going to be subjective to a degree, because you might think that a game looks good, and I could be like, yes, it's drawn well, but the question is, how important is it to a game? And there are some games that I think are going to require something that's going to pull me in to actually make me continue playing a game. If I don't like what I see on the screen, I could have good fun with the mechanics, but if I don't really like what it looks like, I'm not really going to care all that much. Whereas also, if a game looks really good, but I don't care about the mechanics or the story or anything, I'm not going to keep playing it. I don't really care as much about what it looks like if I don't really get into the game itself. So
you're of the opinion that the art has to draw you in before you can get into the game. If the art's not there, you don't have an attachment to the game.
It would have to be an amazing game otherwise for me to not continue to play it. If it was, I guess, in something that's not to my own personal aesthetic, but that's still subjective. What I like when I see a game, someone else can be like, it's whatever. It's cartoony graphics. I don't like that. I want it to be my Modern Warfare 3, Call of Duty, Black Ops 3, high-res, super ultra-realistic brain splattering game.
It's an example of that recently that I can remember. Although now I'm old because I realized it wasn't that recent. But
Mario 1, of course.
Naturally. No,
no, Mario 2.
Yeah.
Doki Doki Panic.
Terraria and Starbound.
Terraria and Starbound. Starbound is still in alpha, so you could kind of call that recent if you want. It's not out yet.
Well, sure. That's a whole nother discussion. But Terraria, I don't like the graphics. I don't like the art style.
Right.
I feel like it's too small. For the color palette, it doesn't feel like great, and the sprites they do their job, but I never was like, man, that's so cool looking, or man, look at that animations. Sorry, Terraria team, you made an absolutely fantastic game. You really did, and I played it for hundreds of hours. But this is an example of one where when I saw it, I was like, really? Is this what we're playing? I don't know. But then Starbound. Okay, what about Terraria?
Well, I was going to say, I thought I was going to be of the negative opinion on here, or the outside opinion, where I was going to say, when you said Terraria, I was like, I don't like the way that looks.
Yeah.
And I'm actually, but I also didn't play it a whole lot, so I can't talk about the gameplay itself, because I played it for like 5 minutes.
I've beaten Terraria. I played it a lot, and I can say I have... Well, so when did you last play Terraria?
Oh, 6 months ago.
So you've played the newest version, the 1.3.
Yeah, I've played several times when it's re-released the new content.
Okay.
So,
and how about you?
No, it was much longer ago. I couldn't pinpoint what year it was.
I actually think it got worse with the updates. The art style, the dark and lightness, just ooh.
So I do remember that in the earlier days, Terraria was not that aesthetically pleasing to me. They didn't have colored lighting. The lighting wasn't a smooth lighting. It was a blocky lighting. I've always been a fan of the pixel art, or pixel art in general. So when I saw Terraria, I thought that it was nice. It wasn't stellar pixel art. You were right. There's not much that you can do with a 5x5 texture.
Yeah.
So the individual blocks weren't that great. They did have connected textures though, so everything sort of came together, but it was a really simplistic dirt or grass texture.
Right.
But I felt that the other content in Terraria made up for that, the variety of stuff that they did. And it was made by two people.
Right, and that's always something to take into consideration. I don't think either of them were major artists. I don't remember.
No, there was one artist, one programmer, and then they both did a little bit of programming, I think. And then
Okay.
they got into a fight and broke up and then came back together.
Okay, well, so especially for like a first really big game, just 100% stellar. They deserve all of the success they got. And I wouldn't ever, say otherwise to them. But if I'm being harsh about it and judging at just the game art, yeah, the gameplay made up for it. By a lot. And the artist kept everything inside that style by being conservative. The textures, like you were talking about, were continuous without making it really feel ultra, like, the old games when you look out onto the water and you can tell it's like 82 patches of water. It looks like a checkerboard out there.
Right.
They did a great job on that. But then when we got to Starbound has such a better style to me.
And going just real quick, you mentioned that the consistency of the textures all being the same style. Terraria's got mods, and I will say, while I do kind of like the look of Terraria. It's not stellar, but I kind of like it. There's not a single mod for Terraria that I've ever played
Where it looks better.
Yeah, if you put any of them in there, because they don't put the effort in to match the style of Terraria, it breaks the whole game for me.
I can see that. That's
It just
how a
looks
lot
so
of
bad.
Minecraft mods are. When I was doing the Minecraft modding thing,
See, I find most Minecraft mods actually fit in, except for the people who try and do high-res textures.
they commonly do, and actually a few of the high-res textures do. I'm extremely versed in I taught Minecraft modding, and things like that. This was a few years ago, so 2 years ago is when my Minecraft modding experience it totally dropped. But everybody kept saying and making, what do you call it, excuses for how it looks and things like that. But the way that critiquing goes in an art form, in an art world, for people who don't know, I have to do what every single person ever does who has an art degree, because the only thing you ever get out of it is getting to say you have it.
How do you know someone has an art degree? They'll tell you.
Yeah, they'll tell you, exactly. Yeah, I have a degree in fine arts. It's in computer animation, so there's a lot of mixed stuff going there. But you gonna do it?
Maybe I'll leave
Now
the
you
room
have to
like
because
you
I
did.
mentioned it on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Go right for it.
We can
Open
cut-
that.
we can cut it out.
Open that.
Do it.
Wow, that was pretty soft, actually.
Oh, it's not done yet.
Oh, it's not done yet. Wow, this.
There we go.
Better than yours.
Yeah, you left the room and we could hear it.
Yeah, I think it was louder by coming up.
By echoing, sorry. Yeah. we're
Well,
all
we didn't
opening
bring
drinks
attention
here.
to that.
My throat actually got really hurt from last night. I don't know what the deal was.
Yeah, I know.
Wow. What are we referring to?
Oh.
Amazing. Nah,
Let's give it a
change of weather.
PG or
Um,
NC-17's for the After Hours show.
yeah.
So you were
to
bragging about your degree.
Right. I was bragging about my degree, and to critique art, you kind of have to. Everybody who gets their stuff critiqued and puts themselves out there. Oh, can you hear it?
Yes.
Has to have a tough skin and has to recognize that what they put out there, no matter what the ifs, ands, or buts or circumstances are, what's out there is what's out there, and how successful it is how successful it is. There's excuses don't work.
Oh, yeah. When I said that they were a two-man team, that was mostly just for context. Like, I don't think
Right, I know.
that being a two-man team excuses you from having a bad art.
Right, and so that's you kind of have to have this dual mentality of it, where like when you're talking to them personally, you're like, hey, you did this with a two-man team. I'm insanely impressed. I haven't done anything like that myself either. Like ridiculous. That's really good. But if we're talking about it ultra critically and how it is and perceived, I think they chose too small of a pixel base in
Right.
Terraria. You know, you're talking about the 5x5 grid.
They
It was
made a
just too small.
they made a choice there. We're not talking
Right.
about them not having millions of little objects in the game that they actually had to create and render themselves.
Yeah.
We're talking about a choice they made for their aesthetic.
Right.
Yeah, and you mentioned Starbound as the difference there, and I think that is so. Terraria is a 5x5 base for each element in the game, and I believe that they put 10x10 textures in that 5x5 base, where something like that. So it's not a 1:1. It's slightly upscaled or slightly higher res. Whereas Starbound, I think, has actually high res textures that they put in those 5x5 because it's still 5x5 cubes.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not pixel cubes. Because they've got rounded edges and stuff.
Well, if you notice when you do mining and stuff like that, it's smaller blocks, but more of them at a time.
Yeah.
That just felt a lot more satisfying, both in gameplay and in visually how it looked. And so when they announced Starbound and they were showing it now, I do have a predisposition towards sci-fi versus fantasy. Although I love both, obviously. I run a D&D campaign in high fantasy, but
Then you go play all your Star Wars games.
I do. But the difference between those, a lot of people don't agree with me, though, that I've met and talked to, including people who are in the arts and stuff like that. A lot of them like Terraria more, so that one can be like a really personal opinion type thing, but it sounds like you guys are relatively of the same. Brandon, I didn't hear if you liked Starbound more aesthetically, just aesthetically.
Well, so here's another thing with critiques. I think that a lot of people let their personal experience sort of take over their critique as well. Terraria has been around a lot longer than Starbound, and a lot of people got really into Terraria. So when you say that people, and you see this all over the internet, not just art critique people that you know, but when people say that they like Terraria more, a lot of times I find that these are also people who put, hundreds more hours into Terraria than they did in Starbound, and it's like drinking, it's like drinking beer. Like you develop a taste for it, and then that's what you like.
It's true. It's kind of hard to parse that, though, because you have people who obviously are going to play more of the one they like more, right?
Well, I mean, it was out longer before Starbound. Like they didn't have the opportunity to play them side by side. Yeah.
If it had been out before, then they might have played
right.
that, and then Terraria came out, and they're like, "What the heck?" Yeah.
Yeah.
If they came out in reverse, that's kind of what I would say. If they came out in reverse, how would you feel? I guess that's
It's a very subjective thing, though. It's really hard to tell if objectively what people are saying.
It is. There's a lot of actually things in game art in art that aren't as subjective as people think they are. You just have to know the language and know. I mean, it's called the visual language.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, everything's got rules that you can follow.
But most people, despite all of that, most of the time it's more like you can't articulate exactly what you like or what's successful or unsuccessful. But most of the time you're right about your opinion on if it's really good or not, as long as you're basing it entirely off of sort of your initial first look at it and you didn't come into it with all kinds of background opinions and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're pre-exposed to it and stuff.
Yep.
Did you play Starbound, Miguel?
I played it very briefly at Weston's when he was at his other house, the other apartment, the townhouse that you were living at.
Oh.
Yeah, I played it briefly there. That was the only time I played it. So I didn't play it a lot. I did see it. I thought it looked good. I liked the way that game looked. I liked how it felt. I didn't get very far in it because I couldn't figure out what I was doing. Yeah, but I guess because I only spent a few minutes doing that before we played D&D or something. So it's not that I don't have a really strong opinion about Starbound because I haven't played it a lot. But I did like what I saw. And I know that I've looked at Terraria and I was like, not feeling that nearly as much.
Yeah. Yeah. I do kind of like the look of Starbound more. And I wish that more people would get into Starbound because a lot of people do prefer Terraria more. But I think that's because a lot of people got their first impression of Starbound back when the control scheme was not very intuitive. They've made a lot of improvements.
That has been funny. That's a whole nother discussion also I'd like to do sometime about early access and how I think it really hurts people sometimes their own game because Starbound was not great.
Sours. Yeah, it
Starbound
sours
was
a lot
not
of
great
people
when it started, and it's had like 100 updates, and so I'll end Starbound discussion with just if you haven't played it since it came out or like even in the last year,
yeah, definitely
try it again. It's very different.
Okay.
Yeah, that's your homework, everyone.
It's my homework. I'll definitely try it out.
Yeah.
And speaking of the Terraria art, y'all weren't very fond of Terraria 1. There's a new Terraria that hopefully is coming out this year called Terraria Otherworld. Oh. I think that y'all should take a look at that as well.
I'll check that out. And you and I got Stardew Valley.
Stardew Valley. I love Stardew Valley.
The art style,
it's
not gripping
shaky.
Me at all. Yeah.
It's shaky.
I don't like those types of games in general, so I already had an opinion on it. But I did pull it up on Twitch. I wanted to watch someone play it, and I was looking at it, and I was like, no, it didn't grab me at all. But I also don't like that type of game.
I do like that type of game, so I looked past it and found a very good Harvest Moon clone.
And that's cool. But
it's more than a Harvest Moon clone.
It's like 90%.
Rune Factory, Harvest Moon, a little bit of crafting, but it's mostly you're there for the relationships and the farming. But yeah, it's a little bit more than
you're there for the relationships
and the farming.
The relationships are not great.
They're not that. No.
I just throw flowers at a woman until she finally obeys me. That's not exactly a great relationship.
Wait, are we talking about a game?
That's how you do it in Harvest Moon.
That's kind of how I just treat relationships in general.
That's just how life works, man.
There's another homework for everyone. Check out Stardew Valley.
I checked it out.
The problem that I had with Stardew Valley, because I do like that style of art, but the problem that I had was it seemed like everything was stretched. Like the character models, all of the other stuff I liked. The trees and the houses and stuff looked good, but the people looked like they were stretched taller, and it just made them sort of look a little awkward.
You're right, actually. Thinking about it, I always did have kind of problem with the people. Also, they move like robots, but
beep boop pop.
Yeah, all made by one game. So when you're going into personal, and if I personally talk to them, once again, I would be like, dude, fantastic job. Oh my god, you are amazing.
Oh yeah,
but
Concerned Ape's been working on this for several years now, and I've been following it. It's amazing that one guy made it. Like,
yeah, I can't believe that. I
didn't realize that, so I will give him credit for that.
I would have to bow in front of him, but looking at it as a game, not who made it and how.
Yeah, because that doesn't excuse anything.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. They're a little bit too tall, a little bit too stretched out. They don't feel exactly right. Mm-hmm. And they're like somewhere between Terraria and Starbound, it seems like. They're like this weird middle ground that doesn't exactly successfully work.
But that's a case there where I think if you're into that kind of game, the gameplay, I feel, sort of makes up for the art. The art's there. It's not all the way there, but I like the game.
Yeah, but when you're staring at yourself in the middle of the screen the entire time, it does sour it just a little. Even there, it does. If your character looks stupid or animation-wise, if your animations are crap, while you're playing the entire time, you just kind of feel it definitely lends a tone to the game that otherwise might be different and change how you experience it, because you have to run all the time in that, and whenever I have to run to town and back, I'm like...
You can walk. You'll run out of time, but you can walk.
Or whatever. You have to move. and all I'm doing is watching the animations of my character, I'm always like, blah, blah. I actually really feel the need to mod it and like make my own or something, which I haven't done. But
yeah, I can agree. If something is front and center at all times, it should be the thing with the most polish, really.
Yeah, that's why like Carter, right? When we were doing when we were in school, he was hyper focusing on as much as the school would allow on character art and 3D modeling of characters, rigging them, and animating them. And that was because what's in the middle of the screen all the time? What's the most important thing you could possibly have, unless it's like an FPS or something like that? The character, how they move. In our little demo game, he made that character and how it moves, and it definitely changes the tone a lot.
I think one of the best examples that I can think of, too, where they do that really well is car games. The car... And the car models that you're looking at are always the highest detail things in the game. And if you ever go slow enough to like look at the crowds and the houses and the buildings and stuff,
So
they're like the lowest res things that they just sort of cheat. Yeah. And that's because the thing that you're looking at all times has to be the thing that is the most polished. Because that's going to be the thing where you're going to notice all of the mistakes.
Right. Yeah, so... That's funny you mentioned the cars and things like that, because they're I really like the UI arts. To change the art just a little bit, the UI art in Forza 5. I haven't gotten Forza 6. I haven't gotten Forza Horizon 2.
Yeah, I haven't played either the 6 or Horizon 2.
One of the major things that changes the tone between... Because people ask me, I love cars. I have a old, terrible car.
I didn't realize you like cars. That's weird to me.
They might not, they might not know.
I'm teasing you.
I talk about myself a lot, so all of these people know everything I talk about already. Now, so I've been asked several times, why do I have Forza 5 and I have Gran Turismo 4? And I switch between them all the time. Like, I don't have one. A lot of people seem to feel, especially on the internet, that they need to commit to whatever their decision is, and if they do anything else, they're undermining themselves.
Traders.
But Forza 5 has this very floaty kind of enthusiast, right? You feel like an enthusiast when you play it. Like, I love cars, and man, these guys spent so much effort developing the cars, and then they have the Top Gear presenters, right? Narrating all of that, and really like their last grand work before all of that went to hell. But
rest in peace.
Yeah, but like the aesthetic of it, you're in this garage that's with beautiful light beams and just meticulously created of like the whole garage, and just the idea of how much you love cars, and you can look at the cars and you can love exactly what these people made. Nobody's ever gotten as much appreciation in a video game ever. No artist ever as the Forza 5 car creators did. Nobody's gotten as much love as them ever. And by the game itself.
Right.
And that's kind of why that one's really fun. But Gran Turismo feels much more, and they actually have an academy and things like that where they literally take the best racers and make them into race car drivers. With actually quite a bit of success. It's surprising how much that does translate.
Well, the best racers have actual rigs. They're not just using a controller, so... Right,
it's true.
And they do spend... I mean, the newest car games spend a lot of time on physics. Tire physics, rubber road physics, all of that, so...
Yeah, and that one feels a lot more unforgiving, a lot more... Man, the UI, if you look at the UI in that, it's blue and white with squares. You pick, and you go. But it has literally, I think, in the thousands of cars. Now, some of them look like crap, because I think they're literally PS2 assets that they took. I haven't looked it up, but my RX-7, mine's not in there because they don't have a convertible in there, but they have like several editions and years of the hatchbacks there, including turbo and non-turbo models. And... literally you follow the line of the car and like the car hood, and it looks like it's PS1 era. It's so bad. But at least it's in there. And so that one, it's much less about like appreciating the aesthetic and beauty and culture, and more like, here's a million cars. You can pick whichever one you want to, but they all act different. And being the best racer is not about, I love my Honda Civic and I can drive the crap out of that. Really, you can drive one car. In the real world of skill, that doesn't matter.
Nope.
And those games, their art follows, and then their UI design follows the game's intention, it feels like. And really, or it really, really changes how that game's intention feels. And that's why I play those two different ones, despite the fact that they're both successful. They're both good. But the art, even good versus bad, those are both good. And it definitely changes the way that the entire game feels and the entire perspective on it. I talked about cars for a long time.
You did.
What's next, Brandon? Bring us to something that's not me talking about.
I want Brandon to clarify, because he's talked about games that he likes, and we're talking about the art of the games, and he criticizes the art. So I want to know from him the importance of the look of art on the game, because I think we both discussed that. And I don't think that you talked about games, but I want to know the importance of it to you.
The look of a game. Yeah. So I said the look and the feel earlier, and I kind of consider those two separate things,
right?
Because an art style can feel one way and look, it can look good or look bad, but still feel good or feel bad, just depending on what they're trying to achieve with that. And I really think it comes down to what the game is trying to achieve, the genre. You mentioned Gran Turismo, and how some of the models don't look as beautiful as some of the other models, like they were just ripping from older games or whatever. But when you take that into consideration for what they were trying to achieve with the game, they were trying to achieve a, I guess, physics perfect racing game. And in that instance, does it feel, with all of these models, does it feel like a racing game? Does the game feel like what they put into it accomplished their goal? And I think it does. Lots of people think it does.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Is it's still very successful in how the game feels. And
then you go to Forza, where they instead went the other direction and said, no, we want things to look beautiful. We want people to look at this and say, that's a real car.
Yeah. To be fair, that game is heavily physics based too.
Right.
But when you get into Forza Horizon, that's where they decided I feel like Forza Horizon is the opposite end of the spectrum from Gran Turismo, without getting into silliness, right? Still being real cars and acting like they're in the real world, but it's very arcadey. It's you're just like, oh yeah, I just let go of the gas for a second and gas it, and then I get to drift for like 100 miles. But with the gas all the way down, drifting requires incredibly precise throttle input, and they just make it super easy to do. It's difficult to do in Gran Turismo. You have to, unless you make 1,000 billion horsepower car or something like that. But in Forza Horizon 2, it's entirely in one. I only played one, so I'll go with that. It's a festival about cars. And it's literally a celebration of car culture. Now, they went a little too brotastic with it, because not only bros like cars, that's a very common misconception. And in fact, I'm going to say the real car dudes, if you want to go for the male demographic who likes them, are really nerdy.
Yeah.
And I actually feel not nerdy. I do D&D and all this kind of stuff, and I feel not nerdy enough to like really hang out with a core group of car dudes.
Yeah.
But the game art, following that in Forza Horizon, is again meticulously detailed cars, interior and exterior, but everything surrounding the cars really matters also. How they do the lighting system, how they do the menus. Forza Horizon 1, it looks like South by Southwest from 2012. It really does. It's got the color schemes, it's got the music selection, it's got how you go through all of it. You get these wristbands, and when you're driving, the wristband that says what rank you are is literally on your wrist, and you see it the entire time you're driving, which is really cool.
Yeah, so I think so the look and the feel, how important it is differs by what they are trying to achieve in the game. Forza, from what I've never played them, but from what you're describing, Forza is a showcase of cars.
Yeah, when you get all the way down to it, yeah.
Yeah, at its core, they wanted to make a game where people said, "That's an amazing car. I really admire that car."
I really like seeing all these beautifully detailed cars
right.
moving in a realistic fashion.
And then the realistic, the physics racing and everything like that is more auxiliary so that you can admire the car more by driving it. Whereas Gran Turismo it's a racing game for people who want to race everything.
Yeah, all the cars that possibly can. And then when you want to go pull pure simulation, like pure, it's funny because they're all degrees, right? It's not that they had one core tenet and went for it. If you want one that's like pure tenet of car culture is Forza Horizon. Pure tenet of racing simulation, like completely racing simulation, is iRacing.com.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I don't play racing games. You're a resident racer.
It's a PC game only. That's a subscription for a game that has real, racing leagues, things like that. And it's the ultimate. It's the end all in simulation, but it looks like crap. It looks so terrible. I'm so sorry, guys. It looked great when you guys made it like 8 years ago or however long it's been, but it looks terrible now, and and it turns a lot of people off of it. So now it's like this core like real racer people who spent like literally like $5,000 on their setup and everything, and you're like, I bought my RX 700 $3,000. Like, you could have had a car and gone racing.
Yeah, so that's a great example of where I would say I don't think that the game art is that important because that's not what the game is going for.
Exactly.
What you want out of your game is going to be very important about what you do with the art for it.
And how successful that art feels.
Right.
So I think in the, what is that, 30 minutes we've been talking about this, what we realized is everybody listening is probably going to have a different opinion on every single game we talk about, and how
give us all your opinions.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear them. And I'm not trying to. I'm trying to say that any individual one of us or all of us together could be.
Wrong, we're not going to settle this as a definitive answer.
Right, we have different opinions on it. It's what it means to us.
Yeah, exactly.
I think something to bring up here. Last thing I want to talk about this section is that sometimes accessibility or someone's willingness to try a game is really going to be hindered or supported by what a game looks like. When I had the Ouya, I definitely did not get certain games that was just like, oh, it doesn't look that great.
Yeah.
And I was talking with someone else who had the same experience. He's like, Stalag Flight, that game looks like crap. I'm not going to get that. What was the other one? Oh, the Fist of Awesome. That looks like crap. I'm not going to play that. And those are like two of the best games I played on the Ouya once I actually did it.
Yeah.
So those are two games I would have completely missed out on because I looked at it and I was like, it's not that I don't like games that are in those styles. I just didn't like the particular art direction they went on it until I played it, and the gameplay was amazing, and so I loved it.
What did they look like?
They're super minimalist, low res, blocky, less than Mario-esque for Stalag Flight kind of, and Fist of Awesome was slightly larger models, but like the characters are kind of stretched out and tall looking, and it was kind of weird.
Yeah, like everything's sort of disproportionate.
Actually, I have like Fist of Awesome,
right there.
Yeah.
We'll put links in the show notes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I saw that, and it's not that I couldn't play a game that looked like that, but I didn't want to play this sort of adventure-ish game all the way through that had those models in it. So I was like, I don't know how I feel about that, but the flavor of the game worked so well that I was like, okay, this is what they were going for, and they achieved well. But I was going to just skip right over it.
Right, and this was forever ago that I was trying to remember this when we were talking about Terraria, but what is that game? And it came on the iOS, and then it went further and further. That has it is the like least amount of pixels I've seen in an absolutely gorgeous art style. The Deer God or whatever is a more recent one. I think the same studio, at least the same style. Kentucky Zero, Kentucky Route Zero. Okay. When it has graphics, has another very beautiful style that really drew me to it. I'm going to be so mad because it's a really simple game where you literally hold like left and right and then click on things occasionally. And the the protagonist is very tall, but he's got to be like a total of 20 pixels. And somehow they created an art style. Maybe it's existed otherwise. I really like pixel art, but I feel like I don't know the history of a lot of it, especially in the resurgence.
Right.
So feel free in the comments to tell me, no, you idiot, this guy did that first or whatever. Because I'd love to know that.
Yeah, pixel art's the best. You're stupid for not wanting to play Fist of Awesome or Stalagmite.
Yeah, but
I'm sorry.
That one drew me to it only because of the art.
Okay.
And the music also was really good. And those two things together, I didn't need a game. And it was good because it didn't have one. It really was walking from left to right and going through essentially a storybook. Oh, it's going to kill me. I'm going to try to put it in the annotations or something. But
what you just said brings up, I guess, a counter question that I think is pretty good. I asked you if there are games where the gameplay could make up for the art. You could have bad art, but good gameplay. Mm-hmm. And what you just said, are there instances where you feel that the art could make up for a bad game?
It's gotta, well, so like we said at the beginning, right? There's sliders. You can go less on one and go more on the other, and they'll more or less compensate for each other. But I feel like if you want to go in the extreme for art making up for other things, for some people, yes. They have to kind of be open to that idea. If you don't think that can happen, I don't think it will. So
I think the difference for me is how I classify something that's not my preference versus something that's just bad. Because we talk about bad art and bad gameplay. Like, I don't think anything can make up for bad gameplay. I don't care how good the game looks. If it's bad gameplay, I'm not fiddling around with something that doesn't work. But that's the difference between bad gameplay and maybe not as much of a game. There's a difference when a game is very light but is super art heavy and focused. That would still be a good game. It's not, if the game's broken, it's just not going to work.
Right, yeah. A simple or light game doesn't mean bad game mechanics.
Exactly. And a simple or light game with amazing art could be a fantastic experience. Whereas a game that doesn't rely too much on art assets but is a great game can also be great.
That's a good distinction to make on there, because if it's an incompetent game,
right,
then really nothing's going to make up for that.
Like, just show me the cutscenes and I'm going to watch a movie.
Yeah,
because your game doesn't.
But if you're talking about how heavy or original or engaging the gameplay mechanics are, the art can keep you
right. Because I like puzzle games. Yeah. So in games like that where there's good art and there's not much of a game, like Numa, Breath of Life, looks pretty and it was fun at the time. But there's not a whole lot to do. You look at things, you move things around, and that's it. Like there's not much else, and it's not that long. But it looked good, and so I was like, okay, that was an interesting experience that I had with that. It wasn't broken, but it was a super light game.
So far we've been talking about just the art in the game, but let's expand this out to the physical world. How important is it for there to be a complete package in that? Does the manual, the cover art, maybe even the commercials or any other alternative media like the Zelda TV show, how much of that is necessary or important for you to feel like the game is a complete game, and that the intended feeling of the game is complete?
So obviously all of that stuff matters for sales, right? And that's really where it stops.
Right. And collectors.
Right. But and collectors, which we talked about, the physical media and everything.
We did just buy a copy of Sonic 3 complete with book and box.
I really had to have.
That's fine.
The thing.
You paid for it. That's okay.
I know. Now I owe you like $10 more for it.
Don't even worry.
Oh, okay, sweet.
It was 32. Yeah, no big.
Where was I going with that? Right, all of the stuff. So, I have to say that part of loving a game. Of course, this is me we're talking about. Part of loving a game is getting to talk about it. and being a fan of a series is really an enjoyable experience, right? Because then we're talking about being predisposed to liking games. When you're a fan of a series, you're predisposed to like them. And honestly, sometimes that's a really good benefit. If you loved a series and they put out honestly a worse game than normal, and you can power your way through and be like, I still like the game and feel enriched and things like that, then you still kind of had a positive experience, and that's good. And it's good to be able to make positive experiences out of negative things.
I'm sure Sonic is really going to test that theory as we get along.
That's true. Well, so Sonic was a game that I grew up loving, right? And I loved that series, and then I became embarrassed to be associated with it. For a lot of reasons.
Because of the games or because of the new fans to the series? Because those are two different reasons to both be embarrassed by the franchise.
Right. Kind of both. But talking about the game art and everything like that, because it was very kiddie, and then he's got this attitude, from the 90s when that was a thing.
Yeah, I'm radical.
I'm radical. And then they started putting, like, on the front of it, they put Shadow with a gun. And they put... Oh,
yeah, when Shadow had his game.
Yeah, and then they put, they would put, like, Amy and some other characters that sort of went into a weird realm for me. That is fine. I don't judge on that, but I no longer felt like I was associated with those. And literally, on the covers, what was on the covers made me decide to stop playing them before I even knew that the games were bad. I just looked at those and thought, this doesn't look like it's for me. And this kind of makes... I would be embarrassed to have this, like, up on my shelf. Like, I talked about wanting to put Majora's Mask box, like,
Right.
in a very artistic floating shelf by itself facing people and be like, behold, Majora's Mask. If somebody did that with, like, some of those Sonic games and put them on there, I'd be embarrassed to have it there. Like, I would not want it there.
Yeah, and I think it was the last episode where you mentioned that the Mega Man box art as well kept you from playing Mega Man for the longest time.
Right, and now as an ironic hipster, I'd put those up there. But but yeah, no, they God, those were hideous, and I was like, my parents always looked at whatever I picked up, right, because they at least stayed engaged with it was very nice. Good job, parents. Pay attention to what games your kid's playing. Even in an era where nobody was really doing that, they did. So I definitely have that positive to say about them. As well as letting me actually pick up M-rated games if they looked like something they knew I could handle. They actually, like, investigated it. Very nice job. But
something that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, they're just like, get out of here.
No,
T, you're not a teen.
They're like, yeah, my kid can play Grand Theft Auto.
Right, yeah, that's the other side of it. But yes, the box art of Mega Man, I think my parents alone, and often when I would pick up boxes, I would think, what are my parents going to say when they look at this? And Mega Man, I was always like, they're going to be like, what is this? What are you looking at? What's wrong with you, son? Because he's just such like a monster of a man. Like, I thought there was something wrong with him. I literally thought there was something wrong with him. I'm sorry, dude, who did that art, because you actually remembering that it kind of looks like a fresco in a way. It's got very interesting ways that he blended colors, and his palette is very well chosen. But your representations of the human face you're approaching Picasso. Like, it's crazy, but it doesn't look intentional. So sorry. Yeah, so I didn't want to get that, and that was a thing that surrounded it. Can you think of any commercials or anything like that changed your opinion? Then or now? Because there's a lot of game commercials now.
There are a lot of commercials.
I just don't watch TV, so I don't see them.
Right, I have to look up trailers and stuff online for things, and that's a thing where people actually go and seek those things out. I think now trailers more than maybe box art is important, and I'm not saying important because as a collector and things, I like that. But it's getting to the point where, we talked about this last time, physical media is going to slowly start going away.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be online. You get a console, you download all your stuff. You can make your own backups if you want, but distribution of things is going to go away eventually. So I think it's important to note that I don't think it needs it to be complete, but from an approachability and a sales point, I want to see that because it's what draws me, and it's the first tangible access I have to the game was, what does this look like? I mean, I would probably say if I looked at the original U.S. cover art for Ico, I'd be like, I'm never playing that game.
I didn't like the cover art for Ico.
It
Me
looked
neither.
dumb, but did you see the Japanese cover art for Ico?
Yes, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's kind of like where it matters. Like, this is it, if you haven't seen it, Brandon, if you're unaware of it.
I have 2 copies of that, and I don't know where they came from.
I don't know why this is weird, because that's the Japanese version of
The Japanese one is way better.
Yeah,
Way
oh my
better.
god, and I feel like such a terrible art person, but that is super heavily inspired by a particular artist, and I can't remember what it was. And they did a beautiful representation in that art style.
We'll put these in the show notes below as well.
Yeah, it will all be there so that you guys can see this when we talk about things. There are definitely some box art things that I take a look at, and I'm like, wow, that actually looks really great.
Yeah.
Like, people talk about like the Resident Evil 4 cover art looking good. I remember the cover art. I remember the cover art for Resident Evil 4 on the Wii.
We're talking about the dude. We're talking about Leon with his gun on a blue background with trees.
Oh, it was red, I thought.
Doesn't
I
matter.
thought it was blue.
Does that change it in any way?
I
Meaningful way?
think you might be thinking of a different game. Is what I'm
okay.
thinking.
Maybe red. Yeah, it does actually. Red would signify a much angrier game, a much more dangerous game, whereas blue is much more of a it makes it seem like it's going to be a Silent Hill type of game. Man, simply color choice, yeah, it makes a huge difference.
I know which
on how
one.
it
I know
feels.
which one you're thinking of, and that's not the version I was thinking of. It looks like it's this. This is the one that I was talking about.
Oh dang, that one's really cool.
That one looks really good, right?
Yeah,
And it's pretty cool, and people like that one a lot. The one you're talking about, and we'll put this in the notes so everyone can see it. It's like the PlayStation 2.
Yeah, that's
Leon
the one
in
I'm
blue.
thinking of.
But the one that I really like, the red one was pretty cool. I like the one for the Wii version, which was black and white.
So I really wish, while you're looking that up, I really wish I could get. See, that's pushing a little too far to me.
I like the black and white on this one, and I like the red one as well.
I like the red one more.
I like the black and white one, but I could say that it might be slightly too busy.
I don't know if I would say that, but the reason I wanted to bring this up is because I would have seen this and like, oh man, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And the controls for this on the Wii are so awful that I just want to burn it. Like, it's bad already with the nunchuck and the...
Are you serious?
Yeah, it doesn't play very well.
Dude, I was a pro.
So you're saying that the art didn't make up for the gameplay?
Yeah.
I would say you have to play it
cover
nunchuck
art.
in one hand and controller in the other, and I still felt that was weird. Did you ever play it with a gun attachment?
No.
Because you can't change the buttons.
Oh.
So you still have to aim with the trigger and then fire by throwing your thumb on top of the
Oh.
shotgun attachment.
What the heck?
Yeah, it was awful.
That's dumb. No, I played it.
Ronnie made adjustments to his so he could actually play the game as well as you could with the adjustments, but you couldn't change that. So
Yeah, that's odd.
controller in one hand and nunchuck in the other to play was okay.
We really got to
I just wasn't that
podcast.
good at it. Yeah, I know about a game one, but
Yeah.
what I wanted to point out is that I saw the cover of that one. I was like, this looks really cool, and I get to play it on the Wii that I own.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh no.
I was really good at that on the Wii, but I didn't use the gun peripheral, so that may have been hurting you. I was gonna say I really wish Katie was more boisterous and talked more about this kind of stuff, not in life, but for the purposes of this podcast, because she's got a really interesting perspective on a lot of these things. Katie's my wife, and she buys a lot of games, and I made fun of her for so long for it, teasing, of course, but she buys a lot of anime games. But she's got like this very particular look onto what it is, and if it has a good enough art style and premise, she actually likes pretty bad games. Even not as in like she thinks they're good, but because she gets like a weird different form of enjoyment out of them. Like there's a Time and Eternity, which is a really pastel cover with these two women on the front of it, and then she was like, oh, that looks interesting, and then she flipped it around and looked at the back. This is for PS3, and it's a game about a bride who has her wedding crashed and everybody's murdered, and she has to go back in time and fight it out. And,
As one does.
Right, as one does. And that game is actually extremely interesting, but not fun to play. So we bought it for very cheap, like $13 or something like that, at GameStop, like, place where it's not going to be that cheap all the time. Anime games go for very cheap, and that's another reason she likes buying them, is because if she makes a bad decision,
you're not out
whatever.
Yeah.
You're not out very much money. But that game was a really interesting study because you're a 2D character moving from third-person view behind you in a 3D world. That's really kind of hard to describe, but it's really interesting.
Brandon's
moving his hands, trying to figure it out.
model it out with his hands to make sure that he comprehends it.
Imagine somebody in front of a green screen, and then the back is decidedly disconnected from them, right? And they're just pretending to run in place. That's how it is, except it's well animated in a 2D character. It looks like they're just plastered on the front of the screen.
Interesting.
It is interesting, and that's how combat works too. It's so strange, and it was.
I think I need to play this.
You feel free to come over and check it out. And the story is cute and fun, but the art style is why Katie picked it up. And game art almost entirely decides what she picks, and she's been really disappointed lately in the last many years because she likes Western games, but like when I'm like, oh man, get Mass Effect 2, and then we'll throw the cover up here. I think I mentioned this before. It's got crap cover art. It's just a bunch of dudes holding guns pointing in direction. She was like, will I like this game? And then I showed her the trailers for it, and then she was ready to get on board.
Yeah.
So this is still sales, of course. Of course, I already had it, so I was just trying to convince her to play it. But talking about how that affects things and how it affects trailers, it definitely affects your perception if you're even willing to try a game.
Right.
And since we're saying predisposition matters on if you're going to enjoy a game or not, I'm going to say in a way, this is a really long, roundabout way to answer that question, but eventually, yes, it changes your experience. If it has a terrible trailer, that will change your experience because it changes your expectations, and your expectations affect the experience.
And what's interesting about expectations is when we're dealing with trailers is there's been a decided change, because you could put out a great trailer for a game, but your trailer is going to be like FMV. It's going to be a cutscene or something else created for your game, and that's not actually gameplay.
If you don't show gameplay in your trailer, I don't trust you.
Right, exactly. And there was a change because a lot of commercials and things didn't show gameplay because who wants to see like a full page spread of, an 8-bit character?
Right.
As opposed to now where, I had someone who hadn't seen Fallout 4 yet Marianne saw the Fallout 4 commercial and was just like, that looks beautiful. I need to play that.
Yeah.
And it markedly is like, show the great part of your game, and people will be like, okay, well, that's a really cool thing. I need to go do that. And so there's certain aspects of that, like the power suit. You see that, and you're like, that's cool. I want to run around in that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that builds it up. That's your anticipation for the game, which is an important thing when you're talking about spending money and time on something. It's an investment of yourself,
especially a new
into
game.
that, especially a new game, brand new coming out. So I think that's important, and this is a sales thing, but that ties into the entire experience.
I mean, yeah, they do it as a sales thing, but as you said, it's still a part of the experience as the gamer, as the person looking at that box, and because the whole experience is start to finish. It's from when you first see this to when you are done with it.
That's true. That's true. It's your anticipation for the game, that excitement for the game, and what do you have but images of it before, video of it beforehand to get you excited about it because you can't play it.
And then even when you're done with it, it still continues with the experience because you still have other things that reinforce the good memories of it and bring it back to you. And we've been talking a lot about the box art and the manuals, but there's also other forms of media that sort of tie into it as well. I mean, sort of art forms. I don't know if you would really consider them all part of the game's art, but there were things like TV shows that started getting made about video games, or video games made about TV shows. But do you feel that could also sour your experience of the game? Things like the Mario Super Show,
swing your arms from side to side now.
Yeah,
that So the television show for anything hasn't changed my opinion on a franchise in general. That Super Mario show definitely doesn't make me not like
Right.
Mario. Although a lot of people have very fond memories of that show.
Right.
And I watched it, I'm like,
I've watched that show and I enjoy the corniness of it, but it's completely... I almost forget
Or
that
even
it's
the
based
Mario
on that
movie.
video game.
There's also the Mario movie.
Yeah, I was too young, and it was scary to me when I watched it.
I don't have fond memories of the movie. I know that, and some will listen to this and he's going to be like, "Oh, I love the movie. You're crazy." But I've told him several times I'm just not a really big fan of it.
I watched it,
but it doesn't affect my opinion on the franchise. Just like the Zelda show doesn't affect my opinion on the franchise. Which, if I let it, would have probably made me never look at a Legend of Zelda game or Link ever again.
That's true. Okay, excuse me, princess. I do have to forget that when I play games. When I play the Zelda games. That one actually probably did negatively affect my opinion of the Zelda series, which is one of my favorite series.
Right.
And for it being my favorite series, of course, it persevered on through, but that was a terrible thing that they did there. And that one I can't even watch. Like Super Mario Super Show is like corny live action, and he seems so happy doing it. You know,
he gets to do something.
It's like infectious.
It's like I finally have a character that I can play, and I'm gonna do it.
Well, and they're also doing positive things, right?
Yeah,
but in Zelda, he's just a jerk, and you kind of get it because it seems like he saved her a billion jillion times, and you idiot, why don't you stop getting? But you always feel like there's some like. It's like mom and dad stop fighting, you know. Like it's not a good experience.
That's not the relationship you got from the games. You don't remember Zelda and Link fighting like mom and dad?
No, I wish Link would get mad sometimes because she's got some BS most of the time. But yeah, no, I didn't. I don't think that affected it. But if Miguel and Brandon, if there was a show that had an approximation of the game, right? Maybe directly in line with what they're thinking of. Or like the Sonic show. I don't know.
That was going to be my suggestion.
I love the Sonic
the Hedgehog.
Yeah, do you think that has more opportunity to hurt or help? And did the Sonic show help, your appreciation and want to buy the games?
I feel like... So, there's some shows...
There's 4 or 5 Sonic shows too, which is something to talk about because some of them aren't that great.
Yeah.
So there's some things like Disgaea has a TV show that was almost word for word the first Disgaea video game.
For everyone watching at home, Wes and I just gave Brandon a very confused look because I had no idea.
I had no idea. Yeah.
Yeah, Disgaea, if you don't know, is
I know Disgaea. I just didn't know that there was a show.
It's a tactics game that is. I think it's one of the best tactics games. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's got sort of it's got a lot that you can do with it. It's a very full game. But it had a TV show that I actually saw first, and then found out there was a video game. And when I was playing the game, I was like, "Oh my god, this is almost word for word the story of Disgaea." It was great. That enhanced my feeling of the game. Sonic the Hedgehog, I loved the gritty TV show. I vaguely remember the first TV show, the one where everything was silly and wacky, and I actually think that the fact that they took that first TV show and incorporated some of the characters from that in one of the video games, I think that was probably a bad move. I didn't really like the first TV show, the silliness of it. Even today, we can't get away from chili dogs.
That's the one I remember.
That's one I remember. I actually kind of liked it.
I kind of liked it when I was a kid. But
you're talking about liking Sonic Underground, right?
The one where everything was sort of simply drawn and Robotnik had a weird shape.
What I remember,
like a head like that.
This is going way back into my memory, but I think it was comics that I read, Sonic comics that were
Archie comics, yeah.
Comics.
But there was a series that were really gritty.
Yes, the Archie comics were very gritty. They were
really negative.
They were based on the TV show or one or the other.
Okay, so I'll say that as a kid, and I might have been 10 or 11, but reading those, I didn't like Sonic that much anymore. Like, I had to go back and play the games instead because that grittiness and that feeling and I wasn't ready at that age to look at a world where it's almost like post-apocalyptic and like not really, but it's like the world is doomed to end, and they portrayed that in a way that the characters took very seriously instead of it being like, the world's gonna end, Sonic saves the day, yay! It was like, oh my god, Tails has been kidnapped, and what, doesn't somebody get turned into like a horrific robot or something?
His parents.
Yeah, what the heck?
And Grandpa.
I couldn't handle that. And it really distinctly negatively impacted the game for me. Even if those are really good, I might really enjoy those now.
I had the opposite reaction to that. I loved it. It made the whole Sonic universe feel more fleshed out to me. It explained what was going on. You got a little bit of story from the books and stuff, but that right there, that just sort of made the whole Sonic universe for me. That, and then the Archie comics also, which were great, and added even more characters. They weren't exactly 100%, the show and the Archie comics tied together, but they had sort of the same premise. I loved them. I thought that really enhanced Sonic. And then there's other stuff that I think started as a TV show and moved to a video game, like Digimon.
Oh yeah,
which had a pretty decent first couple of series, and then they got weird. I can't watch the shows anymore because I don't like the newer series. They had some pretty good movies though. And Mega Man. Mega Man got a TV show, and I don't like any of the Mega Man TV shows.
I don't think I've seen them at all.
And then
I've seen clips.
The Mega Man NT Battle Network and stuff like that. And then they started making video games based on the TV show. And I didn't like the TV show, and I don't like the new video games.
Battle
Network and stuff like that.
I love Battle Network.
Where Mega Man has changed from being a robot to a computer virus.
I really loved that idea. But remember, I'm not an original Mega Man fan. I actually hated the first iteration of Mega Man. And playing them now, they're really difficult and clunky, and I miss all of the extra mechanics.
Well, I mean, my favorite, I don't want to say I didn't like. I wasn't a huge fan of the original ones, but Mega Man Legends was amazing.
Oh yeah. Fantastic.
Mega Man Legends establishes Mega Man as an actual being that exists. That's true. Then they make the TV shows, and Mega Man is
for several Mega Man in my life. Mega Man.
That's what the TV show establishes.
What about Zero? Mega Man Zero?
He's not Zero. That's just Zero.
Zero was my favorite thing.
Are you talking about the game or the character?
Both. No. Oh, I'm sorry. Mega Man Zero, the game, and the character in that game.
Okay, because the character in that game is just Zero.
Right, but he's completely different Zero. He's not, and that's the whole idea.
Well, the robots are interchangeable.
But he's Zero from Mega Man X's universe, like 1,000 years or something into the future, where everything's gone to hell, and Zero is running.
Sonic's trying to save the day.
No, X is a bad guy. He's
escaping Sonic.
Well, oh man, Mega Man Zero. If anybody's ever just glossed over it because it's not Mega Man. Mega Man Zero, the very first one, Game Boy Advance, is my favorite Mega Man game. Full stop. Maybe. Legends is probably better. I just realized that. So let me take back my grandiose statements that I say every single time. This is my favorite game. Do you know how many times and how many games I say that to?
Just a day.
Just a day. A single day, like 8. So I'm going to say it's only just below Legends. But it feels better. The mechanics feel better. It's 2D. I recommend playing it on an emulator because that game is extremely hard, and it's not like anybody gets money for it anymore. So, whatever. I don't support piracy or anything like that. So go buy the actual cartridge and then download it onto your computer and play it there so that you can have save states, because that game is hard as frick, but extremely rewarding. I wanted to see... Maybe there is one. I wanted to read comics about that. I wanted to watch movies about that. But because it's Mega Man Zero, I have just assumed, which is a problem, but I've just assumed that there's zero background support for that. And I really want Mega Man Zero. Now they've gotten like 5 more of them. So that's great. But I think that that is like one of the best things that series has done in a long time. And man, I really want all of that stuff for it. And that's a gritty Mega Man world. It really is. That's where your hero has become the villain, and he's basically killing humans because of 2001 Space Odyssey type reasons, but also Matrix-y type stuff going on there. It's actually very well written. But yeah, I never saw the Sonic show. That was also, I saw Speed Racer at the same time when they made the Gritty remake, and I also was horrified, and I was like, what's happening? They're trying to make me grow up. I'm like 9 at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's because of the shows that I grew up watching, but I watched things like MASH and stuff like that. And,
no, I never watched that.
And I liked that kind of thing. I didn't need my cartoons to be, children's cartoons like the first Sonic show. What was that called? Was it Sonic Underground? The one with all the weird... Yeah, no, the kiddie one.
Oh, no idea.
The one was like Roadrunner style.
Yeah,
everything
really.
Everything was just weird.
It really was Roadrunner style, wasn't it? He would just be like... He would do like the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I don't remember which.
Sonic the Hedgehog, man, he really likes chili dogs. I just remember that so vividly.
That I didn't like that one at all. Cool. So, overall, then, how do you? So y'all aren't super attached to the external things like TV shows.
Not really
for the video game world.
If something's good, then I'll enjoy it. But I haven't let me affect how much I enjoy a game. If it's just a thing that's there, then that's over there, and I'll just go play the game. I'm okay with that. It doesn't do that. Although if there's a good show, it might make me improve my opinion on a franchise. But I won't let it ruin a game.
I have something for you.
Okay.
Books.
Book books or manual books?
No. Books. Novels.
Like the Hyrule Historia.
Sure, but that's more like...
He means like novels.
I'm talking about like the Halo the Flood.
Yeah.
So Halo the Flood and Halo Reach, which for anyone who's only gotten into Halo...
It's a TV show, isn't it?
On
Netflix.
God, probably. At this point. Yeah, they've got a whole ton of things, but the very first one, they just mentioned Reach. Like, oh man, we lost Reach, or whatever, as they do, just like how Star Wars, they're like, oh, after that bounty hunter we encountered on Malachor 4, or whatever he says. Right. And they're just throwing crap out there just to make the universe seem deeper, and then some actual story writer goes back and fills that into a really fleshed out thing. Star Wars, between episode 1 to episode 2, I guess 4 and 5, you would not believe there's like 500,000 pages of novels, and for Luke to do everything that every novelist ever wrote, he would have to do 5 things a day that of an epic, grandiose scale. Right. If he was a RPG character, he would have been level like 20,000 by the time he got into Empire. But Halo Reach was my favorite novel, and The Flood was really good, and The Flood was just a novelization of Halo, the game. I got into Halo late, probably 3 years after everyone else did. I read Halo the Flood, and it was a great novelization of the actual thing. They kind of added an extra character in there just to make it not always about Master Chief. But because you could always have Marines that came around with you, right? And they wrote it in so clever. Right. Excellent job, that writer, whoever that was. And then Halo Reach was completely on its own, and it filled in details about how the Spartans were selected, how they grew up, and then what happened on Reach and who they lost there. And I loved that. And then Halo Reach was announced, and I was done with Halo at that point. I didn't care, they were all the same. And I was like, oh my god, Halo Reach, they're pulling me back. I love that story. I am so excited to see this. So disappointing. The game is nothing like that book.
And that's a good topic for us to talk about in a lot more detail at some point. Is story and extended story,
right?
Lore.
See, well, once again, you put art on there, and I consider novels art.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for us who aren't art majors,
I'm not a writer though.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, you can't lump that in there.
Yeah.
But I understand. I didn't read either of those, so I don't have an opinion on those.
Well, and now, do they even publish Reach? Because now it's completely contradictory. It makes no sense.
I'm not sure. Probably not. You probably
Because it follows, John the Spartan and everything like that, and Kelly and somebody else. I haven't read it in forever, and I still remember a Spartan named Kelly. That's how significant that book was to me. I think I was in high school last time I even looked at that.
let us know if there actually is a Kelly Spartan.
I know that for sure. Yeah, let us know if you read the novels and thought that really affected. I feel like novels really affect how much I love games. Mm-hmm. They really do. Sounds like you guys don't read very many of those types of novels.
No,
because those are
don't.
really gamey novels.
Yeah, I don't.
I try to avoid reading at all costs.
Yeah, Brandon doesn't read. I just don't generally read novels based on those sorts of things. Like when I was playing Magic the Gathering, I never read any of the books that were in that game. And people get into the lore from that franchise.
Yeah,
I didn't read any of that. And with games like this, I don't generally read the novels that are created around it, unless I might just learn some information if I'm really into the lore for something. But
yeah, Mass Effect novels are hit and miss,
right?
But it's actually pathetic that they're hit and miss because. And I feel like they were just pushed out really fast. It seemed like the writer didn't have enough time, honestly, or enough money. Right. But when you have such a heavy story-based thing, and then you hire a novelist, they have a novelist who was on staff for that, Drew Kapershnishk. And I think he actually did write those, but he had like a million other jobs, and then people started hating on Mass Effect, and they quit. Man, I was so sad. So sad they quit. That's a whole rant for some other time. Like I've mentioned every single time I mention Mass Effect. But
we'll get to it someday.
Yeah, we will.
Podcast 100. Weston
gets his turn
by himself ranting around about Mass Effect for 3.5 hours. Special edition.
Enhanced edition.
Enhanced edition. Game of the Year edition.
Podcast of the Year.
Podcast of the Year. There we go.
Other than that, for me, I don't think there's much else. Or let's say, how often does that affect your buying habits, and like how much does it affect what you're a fan of? Like these actual like trailers, TV shows, things like that.
I don't watch trailers.
Me neither.
At all.
Do you?
I do.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad we have a dissenting opinion. I hate it when we're all agreeing.
So, I actually don't keep up with a lot of the new game stuff going on. I watch the big events. I watch E3 and GDC, and
I don't generally have the time to sit through commit to something like that. So I want to skip to the meat of something and just see the things that are coming up, as opposed to a whole bunch of discussion about it. I can read that information because I read way faster than you can talk. So I can just skim information, get what I need, and then I'll look at gameplay or trailer versus looking at a big event. So I don't do that.
Well, so and I'm looking for something different when I'm watching these. I'm not looking for how's the game going to look, because when they announce these things at E3 and GDC, they talk about them. They talk about them, and
right. You can sort of article about it.
Well, you can sort of see how much they put into it, though, because they talk about them with varying degrees of passion for the game. When they get the actual developers out there, or the actual producers or whatever for the game out there and talking about the games, and they've got a lot of passion for the game, and they're talking about, oh, this thing right here, we spent a lot of time on this, and this is going to be a great mechanic for the game, and that's what I like to see. So I don't watch trailers. I don't really want to. I don't want to be tainted, in my opinion, whenever I do get around to the game. I want to know.
You just want to get bias from the developer.
Well, the developer's not telling us that the game is great. He's telling us the mechanics of the game, and that's what I want to know. I want to know
went into it. I do have to agree with that. So I've been to GDC twice. Both times trying to get hired as a developer is extremely hard. Obviously, I've totally failed at that. There's a lot of fantastic talent out there, and it's a very competitive workspace. But a lot of the talks and things like that there, one of my favorite things about GDC is the absolute free exchange of ideas. where it feels like one of the few places where businessmen aren't sitting up there in front of the development team, being like, shut up, developer, because you know what's gonna make sales is if I say there's a hot chick and she's real cute. So that'll drive our sales, and you shut up about whatever you're doing. And then the story writer is like, no, I mean she is attractive, but it's about an entirely different thing. It's about an aspect of recognizing that she doesn't give a crap about what her society thinks, and all around her is all these other women who are very beaten down, and she's this free spirit, and so that's a mark of that. Sure, and you made the marketing team put her in a bikini instead of just shorts.
Exactly. Well, because the publisher is there writing a memo says, I don't think this character's breasts are large enough.
Right.
And the developer's like, she's 17. And the publisher's like, I don't care.
That you're talking about the businessman. That's one of the things that really turns me off too, that you can see right away with GDC and E3. When they bring the people onto the stage to talk about the game, there's a big difference between the big studios and the smaller studios.
Yeah.
When EA goes onto this on the stage, or what, Microsoft Studio or any of them, they bring a PR person on there, and the whole thing flows really well, and they hit all their talking points. They're not the talking points I want them to hit.
Yeah.
But you can tell that those are the people who are the PR people and don't actually know what they're talking about. They were told to say these things because they say them a lot better.
Their job is speaking well.
Yeah, and then the people who are actually passionate about the game, talking about the things I want them to talk about, are the ones who are fumbling and making it, and it's awkward, but it's awkward because they're not PR people. They're the ones who are actually passionate about this game.
Right. And
they know the game. Yeah.
So an example of this, I went to a Double Fine panel, who is halfway between my favorite and least favorite studio sometimes. They waffle a lot, and that just means they have fantastic potential, and they fail sometimes.
For those
they
who
try
don't
things
know,
and sometimes they just don't.
Double Fine being the studio that made things like Grim Fandango,
Psychonauts,
and Monkey Island, right? Didn't they make Monkey Island?
I don't know about Monkey Island. I don't think that was them.
No, I don't think.
Or was that LucasArts?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And more recently, they've had several failed Kickstarters.
They had one successful one, then.
And one successful one.
It still hasn't finished.
Yeah, which still wasn't totally what they promised, which is a bummer. But man, listening to Tim Schafer talk about the 4 games they made and prototyped and what their favorite was, he put 4 of them up there, and it was Trenched, which I don't remember its new name because it had to be changed. Something else. Oh, the stacking.
Stacked, yeah.
Stacked. Something else, and then Sesame Street for the Kinect. And and I was like ready to be like, whatever, dude. And then he went through all of them, and Sesame Street was last. And he talked about the design prototype, and then he talked about how passionate he was about making this. And he says, all you guys are looking at me like I'm insane. And I understand that. But you have to understand that of all of these, this one was... I love all of these games, and so it's hard to say, but this one may be my favorite. Developing it was a joy. There was all of these challenges we had to overcome, new technology we were invested with, and the people we saw who played it were so invested in it that,
it made that experience
something amazing for him. And he's like, and also we made a good game. It's good. It's actually pretty good for what it is. And they made it really quickly.
Interesting.
And so he's like, this is just where like all of our expertise came together, and we were just fantastic, and we knocked it out of the park. And I'm really proud of this one.
And that's interesting because you could probably just feel how we're talking about. It's like, why are you even going to talk about that game?
Exactly.
And because you had that opinion on that, that's something that we're not interested in. It's child's marketing thing.
Right. I almost want to play that game. Like, I kind of want to play that game on a professional level. Sometimes I have a professional interest in things, which I say professional even though I've never been paid to make a game, so I definitely am not a professional.
Semi-professional.
Amateur. But
that would be the technical term for it.
Yeah.
No, semi-professional because he doesn't have a day job now.
That's true. But
it's a joke.
That is an interesting idea that you're talking about GDC and their talks, because I felt like that was kind of a thing that That's obviously not an avenue for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's really expensive to go to GDC, and honestly,
Well, you can watch the big keynote talks at least online.
Exactly,
Which
and I
is what I
recommend
do.
doing that over E3. If you're like a big E3 and you're ready and things like that, watch GDC. GDC is this week, coming up.
It is.
Well, for us.
On the podcast.
We'll have this up soon. Yeah.
Yeah. I really want to recommend you check that out, because I feel like the way we're going to get better games is allowing passionate developers to express their passion to the masses, and to have them not feel like they're embarrassed about that, or that they need to be worried if they say a few times. And you're going to get better, more honest feedback and better games.
Yeah, I definitely prefer the awkward, passionate talks that you get from the developers over the scripted, lowest common denominator talks you get from the professional PR people. So I tend to I'll always skip over anything done by EA. I'll skip over a lot of stuff, because they're just giving us the common denominator bylines and just, oh, play this game, it's got jiggly tits. Like, okay, but where's the substance in the game? Was anyone making this game and actually cared about it? Or were they just looking for a paycheck to keep the game going so that they don't get fired at the end of the week, the end of the month? But going back to the question, I don't watch trailers.
I watch trailers. I don't look at. I don't, when E3's out, or I don't look for the keynote speech. I don't look for those videos, just because it's long and they speak about them passionately, and that's great. I like that someone has a passion about that. I don't always have the time to listen to someone talk about that for a while for something I might not sure I really want to actually look at.
Do you watch gameplay or the story ones, or both?
Both. I want to see both, because I want to have an idea of the game itself, kind of what I'm going to get into for the feel of the game, but I also want to see how the game plays. So I do spend a lot of time making sure, is this gameplay? Is this just cutscenes? Is this just rendered art?
I hate trailers. If the trailer doesn't have any gameplay in it, then what's the point?
Well, sometimes it gets me interested in something that's just like the same as box art. I treat it the same way. And I understand that it doesn't work for you, but I treat it that way because it's how I approach things sometimes.
I mean, if it's just cutscenes, my opinion is it's more of a spoiler than anything, because
Exactly.
the cutscenes are the story.
Fair. That's fair, and I don't want to watch a super long story trailer or something. I don't want something to be ruined for me, so that might happen. But I also don't finish a lot of games sometimes, so it's okay if I actually get that information. But I would rather, I really want to see gameplay. I just want to understand what the game is about and why I want to play that.
So
and I want to see what my experience is going to be when I pick up that controller and start it.
Right, and I definitely understand that. And I think I do occasionally watch a trailer. Often when somebody links it to me, I don't seek them out. But I did watch the Metal Gear Solid 5 trailer, but I refused to watch any of the story ones because I thought they were spoilers. And often, I don't understand who makes these trailers. I cannot believe that the writer who wrote the game okayed the Mass Effect trailer where it literally shows Shepard dying at the beginning.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. It's
If you
it's an
haven't played
older
it by
game.
now.
And never watched a trailer for it, obviously.
I haven't played it.
Well, you knew that already, though.
No, I didn't.
Well, pay attention.
Well, forget things
Now
then.
I can't play it.
So I was so frustrated by that because that is such a powerful... Now, it's immediate at the beginning.
Right.
But that's such a powerful moment in that game that experiencing that completely unadulterated and just shocking you immediately and being like, what is this game about? Is an incredible experience. And so games as art is a different discussion from game art. But games as art, I feel like, need less trailers, less spoilers, less businessmen involved, because I like buying games blind. And I've liked that since before I could really afford them. I actually really do love the idea of going into a game, just seeing if it's sort of a genre I'd like, I'd like seeing critical reviews that have very little to say about what's occurring in the game.
I don't even like reviews.
I do look up Metacritic.
The problem I have with reviews is, and that goes with what you said, what you mentioned earlier, is I don't want my idea to be colored by someone else's idea.
Right.
That's really funny considering you do a review show.
Right.
we review very old games.
It's true, but some people might not have, and in fact, I've not experienced many of those.
Yeah, some of the games we're playing, he's never played before.
Right,
sure.
But also our review system and how we do it is one against. It's like an average of 3 of us, and we are not committed to that system.
No, there's also a difference in that we're reviewing it at the end of a gameplay session. If you're watching us review our videos, you're watching the game being played, formulating your own review.
And it
by the time we get to
yeah.
But the point being, when I said it was very tongue in cheek, because I was just contrasting, you're saying you didn't want your opinion to be, molded by this. It's like, oh, you want it to be molded by this instead.
Yeah.
That was why I said it. Not that your opinion would be molded. Any influence,
but it does happen.
But I'm saying any influence you have on the game, whether it's the box art, like I said, I wouldn't have ever played Ico if I'd seen that game. I was like, that game should belong to whoever plays Sesame Street. The game.
Yeah, but.
And you have that same effect from any sort of medium. I think that's what this discussion was about, is how art will influence our opinion on a game before we've even actually experienced the game.
Yeah,
right.
but there's a difference between the box art and the announcer guy.
Of course, and I'm not talking about the announcer guy.
Well, and I also wouldn't describe what the announcer guy does as art.
Yeah,
That is decided.
It's an art form to trick all of us into playing bad games.
Right.
Yeah, that's a skill. Sorry if you keep hearing things getting hit because I keep hitting the microphone. That's my fault.
But I mean, I can respect not wanting to see to go into the game blind. You want to experience the game for yourself. But personally, like, if I'm going to go and buy a game, I'm going to really want to know if this is a purchase that I want to make at that moment. I want to have as much experience as I can to be like, am I going to get this? Because I was on the fence about buying Far Cry Primal because it looks gorgeous.
Yeah.
Running around with a beast, it looks interesting. I like the idea. I want to play with that. I want to attack a village with a mountain of animals I can just throw at it.
Yeah.
I like that concept. I think it looks good. I'm not sure how it was going to play out, so I want to see if there's a lot of substance to that game.
I totally understand that, but it's a gamble for me. Mm-hmm. And I've been burned by it probably more times than it's been successful. But when it's successful, I love it. And
what's a gamble? Like
buying a game blind.
Okay, you're right. Okay,
it may be terrible.
Right.
Yeah.
Thankfully, Steam has a refund policy now.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's vastly accelerated the rate at which I do this.
Right.
I will say I don't buy new games. And so I will, if I did more of that, then my opinion might be slightly different, because that's $60,
Yeah.
So I tend to, if I'm going to buy a new game, it's usually something that's like greatly on sale on like Steam sale or something like that. That's how I got like Arkham, Dark Knight Arkham, whatever the Asylum one, Arkham Asylum. That's what I got. I got that for like $10 on a Steam sale instead of the full, $40 price. And in that situation, I don't mind buying a new game blind. But if I was going to go out and buy a brand new console game for $60, I may look into it a little bit more. I'm not gonna read reviews still, but I might go and look at a trailer or two, as long as it doesn't have any spoilerific stuff in it. Or if I'm lucky enough to find an E3 presentation on it, then I'll watch that, which always has a trailer on it, but I watch them mostly to hear the people talking about the game than the trailer. It's definitely very different from buying an old game that's used and is like $10 from buying a new game that's $60.
Yeah, and I play a lot of newer games, so that's part of the reason why I'm doing it. Because
I play both, but what I tend to do is pull up the Metacritic review, click just a few little snippets that don't... Usually the quotes they have are well chosen and don't say a whole lot. Honestly, they don't say a whole lot, but they say something that can affect it. And I'll see just to see if it's decently reviewed or not. And it's not that I like being affected by everybody else, but generally if it's really terrible, it's like tons of bugs, and I'm like, okay, well, screw this one then. Or like really awful character and voice acting. I'm like, ooh, that'll hurt it a lot for me. So I'll use that, but otherwise, I'm just looking at the box. I check out the back, and then I buy it.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of bugs, that's one of the reasons why I won't buy a game.
Yeah, you
when
said
it
that
comes
in the first
out.
one a lot.
Yeah, I won't buy a game when it comes out. I will wait a few months, and if it explodes, like Arkham
Asylum.
No, City?
City.
What was the
Origin.
newest one that got pulled because it was just so bad?
Origin, I think. Right? Arkham Origins? I don't know.
Whichever one it was.
I think
we'll
so, but I'm not
figure
sure.
it
I
out.
don't want. I didn't want to commit to it because then
Yeah.
I'll be like, no, I'm wrong.
I
Yeah.
know those are good games, but I'm actually not a very big Batman. I'm not a very big comic book
fan.
hero fan.
I never finished Arkham Asylum. It was okay.
I played that. I own that one, and it was good, but it was really funny because people talk a lot about those gameplay mechanics and that one being that other people steal them or something like that. Honestly, those mechanics have been around for a while. Sleeping Dogs is my favorite of that detective / brawler.
Mm-hmm.
Man, if you guys haven't played Sleeping Dogs, play Sleeping Dogs.
Sleeping Dogs.
Unless you really, really need to be a white protagonist. That guy's like half white. Come on. That was a weird thing. It got very low reviews for a long time from very set specific reviewers that you can still see even in an industry like that. You can still really see that sort of pernicious racism happen because that game is fan-freaking-tastic.
It is really good.
Although the art for that game, let's say that the art on the front kind of really turned me off. It's
I see
It's
very
just a face, right?
It's
no.
a series of faces. There's like a line of people.
And there's a lot of graphic design to it, but it's very busy. And honestly, it seemed like they were trying to be kind of 1970s kung fu-y, with a couple of other things and a weird palette choice. And I think that they really committed to that. They love that cover. It's on everything. And I really wish they hadn't done that.
I'm not sure where it is. You don't like it. If you, in anticipation for this, I just looked up, box art cover for stuff, and that comes up on lists of things that people like. I'm not sure if it's just because of its prevalence, but
well, they pushed it super hard all the time.
They did. So maybe it's just because it's so synonymous with the game that people seem to have accepted it.
Right, and I think
I don't think I'm strong one way or the other. I see it and I think it's okay.
Well, when I saw it, now I'm thinking about it and I think about how unsuccessful it was. But whenever I saw it, I was always like, meh. Every single time. It never was important.
I don't have it one way or the other. I don't think that it's an example of an amazing thing. One thing you were mentioning, because you're talking about you go on Metacritic, and that was kind of something. I used to go on Metacritic. I used to read reviews about games coming up. That was kind of how I base all of my decisions. And that was probably the last time that I did it. Is this what I'm showing on the screen? For people who can't see this, I'm looking at the Metacritic rating for Dishonored, which has a Metascore of 88 and a user score of 7.8.
I really didn't like Dishonored either.
I got the game, played it, could not be bothered to give a damn about the story or the characters. Let someone else borrow it. I never got it back, and I couldn't be happier.
Yeah,
because I was like, it was just, it looked okay. Everything that they praised about like the mechanics of the game were based on a first-person camera, which means I don't have to do anything with the model to make that mechanic work. I just have to pin the camera to a position and say, oh, I'm crouching in this space now. I'm balancing on this thing. Has nothing to do with the game. And I just couldn't care, But so that's why now I'm like, I have to see the game. I have to see more of it before I make a decision when I'm buying a new game.
Do you know what brought me into that game to want to play it?
What's that?
The whaling song.
Yeah.
No joke. And you know what made me want Black Flag? The pirate songs. Music, we're talking about game art as a visual representation. Apparently I'm taking over your weird British... I forgot what he said at the beginning of it, but I was like, visual.
Advertisement.
Advertisement.
I think I was trying to say advert. Like I was just going to say that.
But you did before. You said it
No, I said
twice.
Advertisement. I think I can't even say advertisement.
I mean,
now.
I can't even what?
We've all become British.
We're all... Welcome to ye old. It's Futurama where they turned into...
That's right, yeah.
With your Scottish half Manx.
Super Scottish.
That's right.
What's going on there? I just imitated it too.
Yeah. Great job, guys.
Welcome
Excellent.
to Bad Accents.
What? Yeah. Music, yeah, really affects things, and oh my gosh, the Mass Effect theme is so good.
Music and sound design is something I can go on for about a day.
Which we probably
straight.
will.
We will.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we should.
we're just gonna go through all the categories. I mean,
Yeah.
Gameplay, controls.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is behind the review.
But
Yeah.
in trailers, the thing that catches me is almost always music that they associate
Yeah.
with it, and I get so angry and
When it's
frustrated.
not present.
You're playing the New Order right now.
Yes.
Wolfenstein.
Mhm.
I did, I think Katie pulled up the trailer for that and said, hey, I think you'll like this game, check out this trailer. And I watched it, and I love that trailer.
Yeah,
I love that
remember
trailer
it.
so much.
I remember it.
And that set my expectations so high, and then I heard that they have a very excellent rendition of a Beatles song in German, as if Germany had won the war
Right.
and made, it's like Die macht die or something like that. I can't pronounce German. Sorry, German people. But I heard that song and I was like, oh my god, this is blowing my mind. And it's got like the 1970s, but with weird twists on it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love this idea. I can't believe it. And then I played the game and I was like, crap, it's just another shooter game with like, I
Nazis.
wanted the music and I wanted the media and I wanted the artwork. I actually barely cared about the game.
It really is just another shooter game when you throw it on top of it. I do like the flavor on top of it.
I love that flavor, but the flavor is all I wanted from that
Yeah.
game. I don't want anything
And
else.
you know what? The most fun I had in that game really was reading every single newspaper article.
Yeah.
Even though some of them are really corny, and that's what
They
I was
are
like,
really
"Nah."
corny,
Some of them
but
are
that's
corny.
what I do.
Some of them were good. Some of them were good, and I was like, okay, this is really cool flavor. And then listening to like Ramona's diary entries, I'm not sure how far you got through, but hearing
Yep.
that, the sort of flavor on what happened in post World War II in our era, the world,
Right.
Because it is just a completely different.
Yeah, different timescape. And
Yeah.
that's very interesting. But you know what I ended up doing after about halfway through? Went to the freaking wiki and just read it all because I hated the in-betweens. Because like I was like, man, I just want to get into the next special edition thing. And I was like, do they have any more Beatles songs? I could have sworn this was... No? What? Like, why did they not focus? And why was
Yeah.
that just a little extra thing? Do you know how strong that song was? They did such an amazing
They
job.
did do a really good job with it. That was a point where that game could have been just mind-blowing, just how much the world is affected by it. And they talk about the things. It's in the articles. It's present in everything else that people talk about. But
instead of seeing it ever occur, you just walk and shoot Nazis.
and robots.
And robots. And robot Nazis.
And Nazi robots.
But it's... Which I know that's Wolfenstein. And I enjoyed the old Wolfensteins. But this one presented itself as something a little more. And that's where... I think that's the last time I saw a trailer. And the trailer did make me buy it. And then I was very disappointed.
I didn't buy it. I rented it.
Oh, okay. That explains why you're up till 4 a.m. every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually just rented it. So
Yeah, I would definitely say renting is an acceptable alternative for modern games. If I'm gonna figure out if I want to buy a modern game, I think I would much rather rent it than watch the trailers.
yeah, I didn't used to, but I'm leaning that way now. Like that's
it's-
a new thing for me to actually rent the new games to play them, because when a new game comes out, I go to the store and it's never there anyway. So I have to buy
Right.
it, borrow it, or something.
This
So-
is much more... I would rather borrow.
right. I would much rather
I'm
if
buy
I don't have
actually-
to spend money, then sure.
Of course.
Well, but that's the thing. Renting, you know what? I don't want to rent things anymore. Like even in aspects of trying the game out instead of buying it first. I'd rather buy it and refund it if it's really terrible, like within a day or something like that. I really like... That's the one thing I like about GameStop's pre-owned thing, is that you can return it, but I hate GameStop's pre-owned thing if it's avoidable, because then only they get money. It's always funny arguing with the clerk about it, and I'm like, no, I want that new. And they're like, we have a perfect edition, still sealed, for $5 that was returned like the same day. And I'm like, screw you, I want the money to go to the developer.
They even do that with their store layout. The
Yeah, they
store layout is 90% pre-owned and then one tiny shelf of new.
Yeah.
The last time I went into GameStop was I picked up a copy of True Crime Streets in New York, and I wanted to get the collector's edition new. And he's like, we have a used copy over here for you. I'm like, no, I'll go ahead and buy the new one. He's like, this is over here and it's less. It's like, I like this other one. It's like, okay, I'm just trying to save you money. And I'm like,
It's always funny when
Don't
they
get
argue.
all uppity
Look,
with me.
Look, retail clerk.
I understand why he's trying to save me money because he's going to get all of it. You know, I get that.
Is he though? Like the
Well, no, he's
corporation
not.
is.
The corporation.
I don't understand.
But
why
that's
they do
what.
that.
But that's what they push.
That's their management. They have quotas that they have to
Yeah.
make.
I totally understand, and I guess it's usually a manager that does that, because he actually
They're all managers.
still-
There's only 2 people who work there. So.
right, and he still cares about that. That was always the oddest thing. I worked retail. I worked Best Buy. I couldn't have cared. I wanted if I was telling you something, it was because it was, an interesting deal that probably screwed over the company. You know, like or it was like a clearance thing. And I'm like, oh man, check this out. Or somebody was trying to buy Warcraft 3. The box, it was still there at Best Buy in 2008.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
it was still $40. And I was like, and there's this kid looking at it. I was like, hey, kid, go online and buy this. Don't buy this here. This is really... I love watching this every day. It's the only copy we have, and I love looking at it. But it's $40, and it's obscene. And then his mom came up, and I was like, hey, this is available for online for way cheaper. Not BestBuy.com, anywhere else. And she was like, we're here, and we're going to buy this. And I was like, wow, okay, never mind. And they thought I was like trying to trick them or something into not giving this company's money. Anyways, way back to the point I was trying to make for renting. If I drop down $5 on renting it, I don't actually know how much renting it is now, but I always think, that's like 10% of the game. I could have just bought it if it was a $50 game, you know?
As long as you play 10% of the game while you're renting it.
I guess, but then I don't have anything to show for it afterwards, right?
You got achievements.
But achievements,
Everyone-
that's another podcast.
Everyone's got to collect achievements. So, what? Let's move on to our next question here. What's the most influential game art that you've seen? Visual game art, Wes.
Influential to me or to the industry?
That's a good question. Let's do both. Let's start with our own individual ones. The visual art of the game that blew you away, either internal in the game itself or external with the box art and the manual art.
What's it for you?
You must have had something in mind when you wrote this, because
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to think about what this in general, like a singular one.
Oh, what you mean the hour before we started that I showed you guys this
We've been
list wasn't
talking.
enough?
We
We've
went to
been
the
talking.
store, buddy.
It's sort of a toss up for me. I've always been a fan of the look of Final Fantasy. Both in the game, I think it's beautiful, and the logos are all great with the stylized text, and then they've all got a silhouette of something that's in some way related to the game, and you've got to play the game to figure out how. I've always liked that, and Zelda always has a really good style to it as well.
Yeah.
Except for maybe Zelda 2.
Zelda, I was going to specifically say, we talked a lot about Zelda on one of our Dark Cloud playthroughs.
We did.
But Zelda is, hugely influential in art. And actually, when I started playing art, this is going to be a weird one, and everybody who's ever seen it is going to be like, what? But EverQuest,
What?
original.
No, I'm just joking.
Um,
I think I know where you're going with it. So
EverQuest, I still talk about all the time, and I talk with my cousin who played it with me all the time, who is an illustrator, and he's actually getting pretty successful now. But we talk about what was successful and what I might want to do in a future game, and we keep talking about that art style, and it looks everybody who I show it to now, or even like 5 years ago, is like, man, that's ugly, and the characters were really ugly.
oh yeah,
But when you're looking from first person view, which that game is first person, that
Right.
game is not. It's one of the very few MMOs that is, and it's first person without being a shooter.
right.
It's got these textures and the way that they chose the color palette, the specific placing of environmental things, and the artwork that they chose to represent their game elicited something out of me that no other game ever has since. Now, to be fair, it was very early on, but it kept doing it. I kept going. I got the Ruins of Canark, and that was such an amazing book. I got Detention because I carried it around all the time and looked at it at a Baptist school. It had lizardmen on it. It also had a girl in a bikini chained to a wall, which I thought was what I was getting in trouble for, which actually wasn't that interesting to me at the time. It was these lizardmen and the aesthetic of the jungle that they portrayed and this emotion that they had. And it really translated to how the game felt. And I absolutely loved EverQuest, and I still remember all of those places and those things, and there's a lot of factors into why that is, but I drew, starting my art career, if it can be called that, is I drew Zelda, and I drew EverQuest, and I drew Halo, but that was happenstance because that's when I was starting things. That wasn't actually, and that actually dropped off really quickly. So I'd say Zelda and EverQuest were actually humongous in their art style, their representation, that literally put me on the path that I'm on today.
Yeah, the old Pixel Zeldas, I really loved those. Link's Awakening, A Link to the Past. The Game Boy ones, Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons.
Those are great.
I thought that those were great. And they've sort of become my basis for whenever I'm looking at that kind of RPG style, like well, just say RPG, but that kind of style in an adventure game. If it's pixel style, I sort of compare it back to those games, and that's really what I want, is that sort of style. That it's rich, it's simple, and it conveys everything that it's intending to convey.
Yeah.
I really enjoy horror as a genre in general. Mm-hmm. So when survival horror games come out, I get super excited about them. And I think that one of the ones where I actually felt like the art style really gave me the sense of dread and the fear and the panic that I needed to is in Silent Hill. That's what I remember going back to when I would actually see the models that they had in there, or like Silent Hill 2, and it's like, that dude is huge and has a weird hood over his head, and he has a giant knife sword thing. What is that? That was like, so for me, when I see something that's influential to me, it's if I get an emotional response to it. And so it goes beyond horror in general. It's like, what evokes that response to me? It could be games that have super great scenery. Like the first time I walked around in Skyrim, I was like, this is super pretty. I could walk around in this all day. And I just got bunched up in the air by a giant. Yeah. But, now I get to look at the ground for a little bit, and it looks also super beautiful and stuff like that.
Skyrim was it was a very beautiful, fleshed out world to walk around in. I'd love to play around in a world like Art-wise. That in VM. Yeah.
Man, you gotta explore Morrowind.
Morrowind is good. There are some amazing views in Morrowind. I'm gonna admit that there are some. I agree. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So for Morrowind, I touched on this before as well. I feel like almost always when somebody talks about what they like in Skyrim, I'm always like, God, Morrowind better. Did it better. And I agree in that. And man, I actually think what Skyrim did best is its effects, more so than its actual ground textures and things. You get through. They did a very good example on several cold environments. They had like the kind of grasslands, right, that were in the central that were melted. They had like a green area, and they had the mountains, of course. But it kind of all starts to blend together quickly. At least for me. Morrowind, however, I got lost in the Ashlands. And there's when you make a game, and I have several game design documents that I've written, and it always feels corny if I call something the Ashlands, or I call something the Melted Brook or something like that. It when you call it that, it's like it's gotta represent. If you can't bring it together, you just look dumb. And Morrowind, they had a marsh area. They had the Ashlands, which are thematically appropriate.
Dumber ruins.
Yeah, the Dwemer ruins.
That's one that I remember a lot.
They just look
Being
incredible.
striking.
And the effects occur in there too. Like your character puts, whenever a sandstorm's up, puts their arm in front of their face, which in 2004 was amazing. I mean, I think like Assassin's Creed's the only one that really does that now, even the really AAA titles. Mm-hmm. And I think their environmental design and artwork and how they made a style. This is important not because I'm saying as a counterpoint to you, but because I realized Morrowind is actually a more recent, not that it's that recent, but later in my development of something that I didn't realize that could exist.
Right.
The bone armor, the way the architecture was, the things that they put together was stuff I'd never seen before. And every time I had to go to a new area, I was like, whoa. And which was like every 20 hours because it took forever. But every 20 hours, I was like, dude, look at this environment. A new thing. I had no idea. This is incredible. So I think Morrowind's, if you like Skyrim, I know Morrowind's tough. Maybe use some cheat codes at the beginning to buff up your skills. I really would. Or get a mod that makes it better. And I know that's cruddy, and I know that gameplay hurts, and it does at the beginning. Once you get 5 hours into it, it's all easy and normal. And the gameplay's still difficult to be challenging, but you're no longer like, I'm literally stabbing it, nothing's happening. Right. So once you get over that, I really recommend, if you like Skyrim for art reasons, for story reasons, for how it plays reasons, Morrowind's just got to be on your list.
Yeah, it has to. I agree that was beautiful. I think I didn't play Morrowind as it came out. I played much later, and so it was not something that came up in my mind. But yes, it is definitely has great landscapes, great visuals. That is something you just see something and you're like, this is amazing. Like if there's a dock, you see the whole city and it's beautiful, as opposed to being like, there's a pier by this, by this water over here. That's where that goes. So yeah, I think they did. There was a lot more detail in the different areas in Morrowind.
You know what I think the deal is with a lot of those games? Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, right, were really big influences. Majora's Mask especially for me. EverQuest and Morrowind. This is the era, pretty much the start and the end of the start of 3D, right, with EverQuest.
Right.
1999. And it's not like, the start of 3D, but that was when they actually made the whole game 3D, and it was an acceptable thing to do, instead of being like, whoa, you're out there, man. And then the end of 3D having to be super limited, like Silent Hill, right? One of their choices was you can only see like 20 feet.
Right.
Ever. And they're like, oh, it's foggy. And now they owned that. They owned it hard.
Right. Right.
In Morrowind, they only kind of owned it. Because when you go to Vivec, it's supposed to be big, open, water expanse city, and you can only see to the next pavilion. You can't see further than that. So they're like, oh, the city's always foggy, whatever. And you're like, damn it, this could be so much better with that increased view distance. But they designed it so that you could see in that close distance. And Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, you could see really far away, but they only had it was almost like a parallax, right? Mm-hmm. You saw Death Mountain way back there. You saw kind of your goal, and then just your immediate area. And they always planned things to be like immediate area, and the things that were far away you never really got to see until you were literally on them, but they didn't look the same, right? You didn't walk up to Death Mountain in a straight line, and then that mountain became closer. I think that design aspect and that era of design is what influenced. I want to be my main thing that I try to model in games is the environments, and that's what I'm most invested personally in. That's what I bill myself as an environmental artist. I think those games, those 3 specifically, really cemented that.
I would be remiss in a podcast about art in games if I didn't actually mention Okami as being a game that I've really just enjoyed the style of a lot. When I saw it, I was like, this is gorgeous. This is fun. It does what I'm doing. I'm drawing on the screen to achieve things, and it makes sense to me.
That game was a love letter to that art style.
It really was. So I would, if we went through this entire podcast and didn't mention it, it would have been a problem. So I want to make sure that I do mention that, because it was the first thing that popped in my mind when I thought of art in games, just the actual art style in games. So there's that.
So those are the games that are really those are the games that we find pretty influential to us. But what about games where the art style ruined the game for you? You've mentioned, we've talked about this before, but you mentioned you didn't play Mega Man for the longest time because of the cover art.
Yeah, but the art style of the game itself was fine.
Right, the cover art's awful.
Right.
Right.
That one and the second one.
But is there any game that you can think of that you got the game and you played it and it was just unbearable because of the game art? It just ruined the experience for you. Took you right out of it.
Everybody's gonna hate me. World of Warcraft.
Okay.
Which one? Oh, World of Warcraft.
World of Warcraft.
Warcraft.
I just couldn't.
I didn't dislike the art style. I was already displeased at MMOs in general.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think the art style brought me in as much as it could have. But I don't think it turned me off any more than me already being turned off of it. Just
Yeah.
I don't think it's bad. I can see someone liking that.
I just don't like that style.
Yeah,
and I didn't
yeah.
grow up with Blizzard, and I didn't actually like a lot of their games. I know that's weird. That's personal opinion. 100% that's personal
Yeah,
opinion.
mine's opinion as well.
World of Warcraft, you can absolutely love the art style, and I don't think any worse of you at all. And I know I said EverQuest influenced me, and and comparing them side to side, one is distinctively more developed than the other.
Right.
But I just couldn't get over the idea of investing hundreds of hours of my life in a wacky giant pauldroned doofus who dances to Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do it.
If something is too wacky, too chibi, too super deformed or something, it already turns me off a little bit just because that's not my art style. I prefer a lot of games to be a little more realistic. It doesn't mean they have to be hyper realistic, high res. I just like character models to be a little more human-like if they're humans. So when the opportunity comes, if I have the choice between a more realistic Final Fantasy character versus a, chibi-ish, super large features, super large weapons, crazy hair, I'm going to go for the more realistic-ish one, even if it's a low res.
Counterpoint.
High res.
Wind Waker.
I loved Wind
Do you
Waker.
not like it?
I can't say I don't like it. It's the art style for me is not something I generally go towards, but I do like Wind Waker.
It's just so well executed.
Yeah.
I actually was prepared to dislike it, and then when I played the game, I was like, "This is perfect for the game."
Yeah, it's great.
It fits. It fits that, and that's kind of like if it fits into that style of thing and it's going to do that, that's fine.
Right, it's
That's
a whimsical adventure.
If I had to rank it, it's going to fall back because it's not something that I generally play or will pick up or get into, but it does work.
Yeah.
So it's effective.
Yeah, there's always exceptions.
There are exceptions. It's not hard and fast, and some people may just not like it for that. And I was on the fence a little bit, but it was done well.
Yeah.
So
What ruined anything for you, Brandon?
I don't have a good answer for this.
You brought it up, but no good answer.
Yeah,
It's a good question, though.
I don't play games that have that problem.
So you don't have the chance to play it to actually know.
Right. So I don't really have any experience in that regard.
And that goes back to the importance of art in the game. You're not actually playing those games.
Right.
Because it could be a good game and you're not aware.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I've got a few games here that have art styles that I wouldn't necessarily want to play, and I have not played them yet. And then there's some bad FMVs and stuff like we've got for the Sega CD Fahrenheit downstairs that you were looking at.
That seems interesting to me. I'd like to play that.
It's
For when it came out at the time, it was an interesting thing to me, so I have that nostalgia.
Sure, but I haven't played it
about,
because it doesn't look appealing to me.
What about I don't know. It says worst art that you've seen in games. It could have been good. I was looking at Ooga Booga. You seem to really enjoy that game, and I'm still trying to remember why.
I didn't want to play Toomba or Crash Bandicoot
What?
or Donkey Kong.
I love.
I got over all of that.
Donkey Kong or Donkey Kong Country?
Country. These the Super Nintendo versions.
those are
I
great.
know people, and I love them now. But
I'll talk about Donkey Kong Country on another podcast because I have issues with that game. It doesn't have to deal with the look,
okay.
maybe a little bit, but it's. I think it's deeper than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a difficult one for me to really have much of an opinion on, just because I didn't play the game to look bad. Yeah.
That one's difficult. I might actually have to come back to that one on another time.
I want to
because
take some time to think about it. There's definitely something. There's definitely, like, when I'm talking about art, there is an art style that I feel kind of unsettling in animation. It's an older art style, and I'll try to pull up an example of it so we can talk about it on another podcast or something. Mm-hmm. And I kind of remember having that sort of feeling with Donkey Kong Country a little bit. I'm not sure if it's really the art style as much as it is kind of the music. The whole thing is kind of dark, and I think something about it kind of gave me the same feeling now that I'm thinking about it. So there's definitely some art styles that put me off for other reasons, and I'm not sure. There's not a tie-in. I don't see a distinction between these two, but I have the same kind of reaction to them, which is really interesting to me, that I have that same sort of
what's the game?
Unsettling. It's not a game. It was just it's an animation style.
Okay.
I'll bring it up.
Clay Fighter, 63 1/3.
You know, in Clay Fighter kind of has. I have that same kind of feeling toward it. It feels like something about it is unpolished.
It's not that it's unpolished. I think the issue that I have in a lot of this is Uncanny Valley stuff. And 63 1/3 has that.
Maybe that's what it is. It might be Uncanny Valley. I'm not recognizing it because I'm literally feeling my skin crawl thinking about my memories of playing those games, and I had that experience at the time.
I think
maybe
that's Uncanny Valley.
Is.
I don't. Wow. But you asked ruined, and I have to say, none of those games were ruined by that. For me, now I never even played 63rd and 3rd, but my life was ruined in that I didn't, apparently, according to some sources.
I wouldn't say your life is ruined, but I played it, and my cousin had it, and we played.
So that is a tough one because I think I looked at the box art, and if I didn't like it for most of my life, I didn't play it. So then I can't say it was ruined. I'll have to go back, and then games that I didn't like, I didn't play much, so I don't have a lot of memory of.
I think our homework for the next time is to play some ugly games.
I'm thinking now.
I want to pull that up.
I have a game that's sort of a Harvest Moon knockoff called Shepherd's Crossing. The box art's not very appealing, and I'm remembering now I never really played much of it because I think that the game art itself sort of turned me off of it as well. So I guess that's on my list right there is Shepherd's Crossing for the PlayStation 2.
I got something. It's now, of course, it goes back into what's art. And this is animation specifically.
It's a visual art.
Yeah, it's visual art. Thank you.
That's what we're talking about.
Elder Scrolls Online. I wanted to like that game, and I got to play the beta of it. And shuffle. I love crafting in games, right? And so I chose blacksmithing, and I was like, all right, let's check this blacksmithing. The animation is horrid. It is somebody who just said, I need to get this animation done. And then they did. The weight of the swing. How did you pass animation class? I don't... I understand that the circumstances are probably that they had a lot of crap to do really fast, or maybe they even outsourced it or bought it pre-built from somewhere. That's a common thing that happens now. But, putting people like me out of a job. The swing on that hammer it looks like a rubber mallet. Not a real rubber mallet, a toy squishy one that bounces back harder than you swung it for. So he just goes whap, and then it bounces upward faster than he did it, and it's kind of hard, like demonstrating it is really easy, but we're on audio, and so it's just like boing, boing, like that was the sound effect it should have had, and then it made this like clank, and I'm like, no, this is all wrong. That looks idiotic. And the girls like had this more weighted swing that looked like they were having a tough time. And I'm like, no, now you just introduced sexism into animation. If they're a freaking blacksmith adventurer, they're as strong as anyone else.
Right.
Like, no. And that ruined that game for me entirely. Those animations, like literally I'm always on the fence about MMOs. I really can't commit to them very well.
I don't think I've played one for more than like a month.
Yeah, so. I really can't make like a month and a half max. Right. And those animations 100% killed that game for me. The other ones weren't great, and when I saw that, I was like, I can't sit here and watch this. So that one was one where just because of how it looked, I couldn't play it.
No, you got one.
Yeah, we got at least one now.
We got one. All right. I think we have some more we can talk on about this, but we might do a little bit more research, and this is, of course, a very broad
Yeah,
category.
we've got a few more topics for future episodes.
For next time.
More specific style topics and stuff.
Great.
But that's going to be it for today behind the podcast. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.
Make sure to leave comments on what you like and follow us on Twitter at BTPixels. Thanks for listening.